When we go into the backcountry, we want to have a few things on our side. We want to be carrying rescue gear with us, the beacon, shovel, probe. We want to know how to use those things. Ideally, we want to have some avalanche education as well. The bottom line, though, is that if an avalanche happens, a mistake's been made. You blew it. And now you're just doing mop-up work. You're trying to take a situation which is really bad that you created, and now you're going to try and make it better as best you can.
On New Year's Eve 2005, a group of 5 close friends got together for a 3-day backcountry ski trip. What follows is the story of this trip and how it changed their lives forever.
Woke up to probably a foot and a half of fresh snow. Pretty high avalanche danger. We'd experienced some just isolated failures, wolfing, some cracks. So we started off pretty easy, skiing some pretty dense trees just behind the hut. Yeah. Got phenomenal turns, had a great day, and turned in for New Year's Eve exhausted and just thrilled to have an opportunity for another day.
All right. It's New Year's Eve, celebrate a little early. It's 9 o'clock. I want to say thanks to Larice for letting us go on this great trip. Happy New Year's, Addie and Junior, and I'll see you in a bit.
Happy New Year's, Reese. Wish you were here. We're doing our best without you.
Hey, honey. Thanks for letting me go on this great trip. Wish I was there celebrating with you, but this is a close second.
It's been snowing the whole time since we got here. Getting ready to head out. Super, super blower. Today's the day we live for.
Good morning and Happy New Year. This is Doug Chabot with the Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Advisory issued Saturday, January 1st at 7:30 a.m. This advisory does not apply to operating ski areas. The Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center is issuing a backcountry avalanche warning for the Gallatin and Madison ranges south of Big Sky, the Lionhead area near West Yellowstone, the mountains around Cook City, and the Washburn Range in northern Yellowstone National Park. New snow over the last few days has been deposited on an extremely weak snowpack. For today, the avalanche danger is considered high on all slopes. Areas of unstable snow exist. Both natural and human-triggered avalanches are likely. Avalanche terrain and run-out zones should be avoided.
So I woke early at 6 o'clock in the morning to another foot and a half of new snow, and skinned out to pick up our friend. And in the meantime, the group that I was skiing with the day before continued to ski. We stayed on the same slope just because of our concerns for avalanche danger, and to access other slopes would have crossed some sketchy terrain. So we maintained the same area. So they skied up until about 2 o'clock. That's when I made it back into the yurt.
We rate the avalanche danger with avalanche danger descriptors, and it goes everywhere from low to moderate, considerable, high, and extreme are the 5 avalanche dangers. And what they refer to is how likely it is you're going to see avalanches in the backcountry, natural avalanches, as well as how likely it is that you're going to trigger something.
Kind of grabbed some lunch, decided to go out and make turns. They had a great day, hadn't experienced any instability issues. So we skinned up and got to the top, discussed our line. There was some concerns of some stability in one aspect of it, but we started off skiing, and it was on that first run that I skied, probably descended a couple hundred feet, tucked into the trees. My other friend cut across right at the base of this kind of rock fin that ran along the ridgeline, which ultimately started the avalanche.
So in order to have an avalanche, we need four things. We need a slab of snow, which is typically something dense, sitting on top of a weak layer, something weaker than itself. And that slab sitting on a weak layer has to be on a steep slope. And when we talk about steep slope, we're talking about slopes typically steeper than 30 degrees. Most slab avalanches happen between 37, 38 degrees. So we've got the slab sitting on a weak layer on a steep slope, and then the fourth thing we need is a trigger, such as more snow. If Mother Nature, keeps snowing and snowing and snowing, adding weight and stress to the snowpack, it can fail and crack and we get an avalanche. But for an avalanche center, we're really concerned with human triggers.
My buddy yelled avalanche, and I looked up the slope and could see the powder cloud coming, and at that point grabbed the largest tree that I was around, and started to feel the powder cloud enveloping me. At that point, there was, what seemed like eternity, but it was probably very minimal. And then I was blindsided, hit, blew my position off the tree instantly. I knew I had to struggle, swim, punch, do whatever you could to stay on top. And then all of a sudden, the powder cloud dissipated and I was on top. And I was looking around to gain my orientation. At that point, I looked down at my leg and my boot was turned 180 degrees. So my toe was facing backwards and my bone was sticking through my ski pants about 4 inches. I took my leg, re-righted it 180 degrees, grabbed it, and started picking my way through the cliff band. At that point, the two other individuals in our group that were not caught in the slide, they started working their way down and already had switched their beacons to search. And they were yelling out, where's Chris? Where's Blake? Where's Sam? They made visual contact with Chris. I yelled back to him that I was okay, and it became evident that Blake was missing.
You can go skiing when there's a high avalanche danger or a considerable avalanche danger. You just have to really mitigate the terrain. You don't want to get in avalanche terrain. You want to stick to lower angle slopes or be in thicker trees, because at least with a high avalanche danger, it means that you're very likely to trigger a slope. So, they were doing a lot of things right. They were on lower angle terrain. They were sticking to the trees. They knew the avalanche danger was high, but they just got a little enthusiastic and pushed themselves a little farther than they should. And unfortunately, Mother Nature is very unforgiving on that. And they triggered a slide. And when they triggered the slide, they had multiple people caught in the avalanche because it was a treed slope. They were at these areas where they thought, I'm safe. Sam was in an area where he thought, okay, I'm next to a pretty sizable tree here. If something happens, I can just grab on and hold on to it. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. When an avalanche came down, it came down pretty violently, pretty fast, and just ripped people away from these areas that they assumed were pretty safe.
So as I picked my way through the cliff band, I switched my beacon to search, as well as the rest of the party. And as we were descending through, one of my friends, when the avalanche tore out, it tore out around the ridge and tore out actually a whole nother drainage basin. So he traversed over that way and started zigzagging down the slope to find it. And as I descended through the cliff band, I finally picked up a signal, and so did my friend Jason. At that point, we all converged on my location. I dug myself into the slope, and they proceeded with the search. It took us about 4 minutes to locate Blake in his position. Additional 4 minutes to get him dug out, rolled over.
They were able to get to Blake very quickly because they all had transceivers. They were all moving in the correct direction, and then Blake had a piece of his pack sticking out of the snow, which facilitated getting him out that much quicker. Unfortunately, he suffered trauma and didn't survive.
They could already see at the time there was some swelling around his neck. And at that point, Blake was considered deceased, and we moved to stabilization of me and then trying to get me to the cabin, or the tent that we were in, which took about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We had to go probably 400 or 500 yards max, but the snow was waist to chest deep. 6:30, 7 o'clock, we finally made it to the yurt. They pulled me in, And then we kind of just went to work stabilizing my leg. We tried to relocate it because my bone still was about 4 inches out of my leg. In total, I had about a 17-inch laceration where my bone had come through, and then multiple puncture wounds from my fibula poking through. We tried, and it was just basically my buddy grabs my leg and pulls on it trying to get the bone to go back in, and we couldn't. And there was actual chunks of bone, and they just kind of put that in the dressing because they didn't know if doctors would need it or not. Someone was always up with me all night because we decided no one should go out that night. With the avalanche danger and it being dark, it wasn't safe to put anyone out there. We had Tylenol to kill pain. Pain was pretty intense, but I think there comes a point in time where your body just blocks it out. One of the big concerns was dehydration. We had no idea how much blood I was losing because I was in a sleeping bag with this whole bandage. So I really wasn't leaking blood much elsewhere. I mean, the sleeping bag was absorbing it if it was coming out. I talked my friend Jason into letting me sit up, swing my leg over the cot, and as soon as my leg swung over the cot and dropped low, it was like someone turned a faucet on and the blood just started running out onto the floor. And we knew that the situation was much more grave at that point.
So on Sunday afternoon, I got a call at home that there was an avalanche in the Centennial Range with 1 person dead and 1 person seriously injured. And I was asked to come in and do the accident investigation the very next day. So I was asked by the Forest Service to go check that out. So the next morning, I got up early and drove to Ennis, Montana, which is near the area, and met the ranger. And I found out that morning that the body was still at the scene and the injured person, which is Sam, was also still on the scene, which was quite a shock. And on our snowmobile in, we could see the Air Force helicopter attempting to get into the hut. And the weather was horrible. The ceiling was really low. There was probably only about a 500-foot ceiling. They were flying treetop level. And they ended up setting down in a meadow, waiting for better visibility. And after I chatted with the pilot, knew he was going to try and make an attempt and he was going to sit there at a later time, I went in with 2 other people to get to the hut as fast as I could. So I got in there at around 11:30, 12 o'clock. It was about an hour ski in. And I found out I was the first so-called rescuer to arrive on the scene.
At about 11, 12 o'clock, Doug Chabot came in, and they went up and actually did kind of an analysis of the slide and what occurred. And then at the same time, a doctor from Dillon came in and did an analysis of me. He didn't think I'd make it through another day. Basically felt I was on the end, and I was telling him, no, I can make it another day, you know, whatever it takes. And then he really convinced me, okay, I need to get out that day. Then when they discussed more, as they explored my injury, that I probably wouldn't even survive a sled all the way out.
So right away, it was very apparent that Sam was critically injured. He needed to get out pronto. Even though I was there to do the accident investigation, Sam kind of became the main priority. And we decided 2 things were going to happen. Either the helicopter was going to get in, or if not, we were going to drag him out. You know, it was all going to happen that afternoon. So while people were packaging Sam, getting him ready in a litter, I went up on the slope, saw where Blake was, skinned up the slope, took measurements of the slope angle, the size of the slide, took a bunch of pictures and some video, looked at the layering in the snowpack, and I just kind of pieced together what happened from a snowpack perspective, as also from the human perspective. And snowpack-wise, we had just issued an avalanche warning for an area adjacent to where they were, that there's a high avalanche danger on all avalanche terrain, any slope above 30 degrees. And the reason for that is we buried a very weak layer of surface hoar underneath, which is now buried about 2 feet under the surface with the successive storms. And we were seeing a lot of natural activity on that, and we were really worried about any human triggered activity.
Surface hoar, as the name implies, forms on the snow surface, and it forms when there's cold, clear, calm nights. It's basically frozen dew, and oftentimes they manifest themselves as big feathery crystals of snow, really sparkly. The reason there's such a problem as far as stability in the snowpack certainly isn't when it's on the surface, it's when it gets buried. It's one of the layers that is the most deadly weak layer, and a lot of times the fractures associated with buried surface ore tend to propagate across the slope, so the fracture may occur several hundred feet above you.
When I went up to the crown line, which is where the avalanche broke away from the rest of the slope, it was in an open area that was wind loaded, and when I dug down, there was the surface ore layer. So the avalanche broke about 3 feet deep, was about 400 to 500 feet wide, and ran a slope distance of about 800 feet. Slope angle was the prime angle. It was around 36, 37 degrees. And the reason the weak layer of surface ore was found above in this kind of open area, but not down in the trees, is that's kind of the nature of how it's formed. We need a kind of colder, clearer nights. This formed a few weeks prior, and in the trees, it's too shaded from the night sky, and the surface ore just doesn't form. You know, with these guys, they were very experienced. They had a decent sized group. They were doing a lot of things right. You know, they were talking about it. They knew the avalanche danger was high. They were discussing ways to mitigate the risk, as well as still try and get some turns in. But the human factor kind of took over, where even though they knew this, as they got higher and higher every successive run, they kept getting a little higher up the slope. What happened is they left the trees where it was, you know, denser trees, where the surface ore wasn't there, and they ended up getting out into this open slope above the trees where it was, and that's where the slide was triggered. And unfortunately, because of the trees, that's where everyone got strained through. That's what broke Sam's leg. That's what ultimately killed Blake. So the buried surface ore layer with a wind load on top of it, it was just sitting there waiting for a trigger, and unfortunately Blake was it.
You can dig pits, you can read avalanche reports, you can poke your pole down and feel failure layers, you can check slopes, but there's a huge human element. The stoke of the day, epic powder turns. I think the biggest thing that came to us is we had become reassured. We'd skied the same slope for 2 days without consequence. We had gained reassurance in that. And then you top that with having an individual in your group that is level 1 certified and level 3 certified and master's degree. Blake, that passed away, had a master's degree focused on avalanche studies. And that bumps your risk level up a little bit because you understand the system more.
You know, if you've been looking around on the way over here, I don't see it on this slope, but those facets that are growing on the surface, you might ask Tom about those a little bit. They're called surface ore, and they grow, and that's mostly a radiation balance problem. You get a cold surface temperature, little humidity in the air, and it condenses. It's basically frozen dew.
One of the things we are trying to do with all this work is ultimately save lives, you know, and we're trying to save lives for recreationalists. We're probably the prime beneficiaries of a lot of the work we're doing, and most of the people who are interested in snow and avalanche research are backcountry enthusiasts, you know. Blake Morstad was a graduate student of mine. Blake was a really exceptional guy. He was the #1 student coming out of the College of Engineering as an undergraduate, and I had the pleasure of him coming to work with me wanted to work with me on his graduate work, and he wanted to study snow. He was an athlete, avid backcountry skier, climber. Blake Morstad was an exceptional guy who did his studies on this near-surface process, and I think he's done, up till now, the work that we did on near-surface, on radiation recrystallization, which is one of these near-surface processes, is probably the best work that's been done to date. It's the first real quantitative work that's been done.
We had a discussion just prior to the slide. And basically, the 5 of us got together and we tried to indicate where were potential failure areas, where were safety areas, how should we ski this slope to be appropriate. But we didn't enact those. We had the discussion, then we allowed it to occur the way everyone else wanted it to. There's a discussion, there was a rock fin that sat there that was, you could tell there was wind loading against it. I mean, there was a distinct pillow of snow sitting there. And we said, that's probably not a safe spot. That would be the spot to trigger. Blake was a very accomplished skier. He had chosen to ski up above, higher level, get up above us and then chose to ski that route despite the conversation we had.
Part of our job at the Avalanche Center is to investigate avalanche incidents. And a real common thread is that the people understood something about the snowpack and the avalanches. And they may have even recognized or even known that there was an avalanche danger present, in that they kind of would say, well, we knew the avalanche conditions were not great, but we still felt that we had to ski this powder. And so just having the knowledge of what creates an avalanche, or listening to the advisory and knowing what the current avalanche conditions are, is not enough.
It was probably 3 o'clock or so, and we got just a radio from the Great Falls helicopter rescue crew, and they said they were going to give it one more crack. And they miraculously came in and rescued me. But they, talking to the guy, he said they sat down in a flat spot out in the valley. You know, military, when they rescue, they basically look at it and they say they have to secure the safety of their crew. And the pilot looked at the guys and he said, I can't guarantee you your safety, but I can guarantee you that if we were one of that kid up there, we'd want to know someone else was trying to rescue us. And they came in, and he didn't even set the helicopter down. He flew it the whole time. And when they pulled me up in the litter, the sled was dead even with the floor of the helicopter. When they pulled me in, and I told the guy, thank you. You know, I thanked him for rescuing me, and I asked him where we were going, and it was Bozeman. And then they gave me morphine and knocked me out for about 30 minutes, and the next thing I saw was circle around Bozeman Deaconess with the water tank. And I knew I was home. And that was the first time I was really able to, recognize what had happened, and got to the hospital, and doctors didn't know why I was alive. I had lost over half my blood supply. I had 9 units of blood. My kidneys were shutting down, and my leg was hanging out. Had I had it again, we would have set from the day one a very concrete that if one person disagrees with the choice of the group, then that's a group decision. And really trying to erase the stoke of the day, and recognizing that the enjoyment of backcountry skiing is surrounded by the people you share it with and the experience of being out there. And it's very little attributed to how deep the turns were, how steep the turns were, how long the turns were. I mean, it all adds to it, but when it comes down to it, I've yet to be on a backcountry day, regardless of big turns or little turns, that I didn't come back fulfilled with enjoyment of being just out there.
Go. Yeah. Oh. What do you think, Blake?
That was the best shot there.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah.
Lower.
Stick back. Oh. Matt. So numbers. Matt, tell me what you really think. Dude, I'm speechless. That was the blow. Deep.
You don't want to fall into the trap of thinking you're any smarter than nature, or that you're any more capable than the other guy of not triggering an avalanche. I mean, that's it comes down to. It doesn't matter how much education we had, there's still the same opportunity. The same failure plane was there. The slide was triggered by pushing the terrain up to get a dozen more turns. If we had stayed in the more heavily treed aspects, we would have been in a safer situation. But again, it was that bigger lines, more stoke, and the false idea that to ski bigger, more aggressive was how we weighed a successful trip. My recovery was 17 days in the hospital. I believe approaching 10 surgeries. I had the amputation on January 13th in the evening. Pretty severe pain after that for a while, but went home and was actually back at work on the 26th of January. And went and saw doctors every day. Ultimately, on April 18th, I got my first prosthetic leg.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a tennis shoe will even feel even better. Check it out. It's not bad for your first steps, huh? No kidding. No crutches.
You're doing awesome, love.
Wow. Sarah just said, suck it up.
What do you think, Sam?
Pretty dang wild.
You know, they said my case was textbook worst case scenario. It's the kind of stuff you see in a medical journal. And then the flip side is my recuperation and adaptation to my prosthetic is textbook best case scenario. And they gave me the clean bill of health, go out, push it hard. Losing Blake was, it's a huge loss. I don't think I've even fully experienced what it means to lose Blake because he was the best friend. Not having him by my side's been a big loss. I know it was really tough for one of my friends because we had lost gear, so he had to go up and get skins out of Blake's pack, you know, and to go up the next day and see your friend with 6 inches of snow on him. The biggest thing at the moment was his wife was pregnant with their first child, expecting to have him in February, and this was his last hurrah with the boys. So I remember once we stabilized me in the yurt, and immediately the focus switched to his wife Addie and their baby, and making sure everything we did kept her health in mind. I mean, we could not jeopardize her health in this child. To go from, in the matter of seconds, to have your life turned upside down, from, man, I'm best day skiing ever, but I'm nuked, to, oh my goodness, my best friend just died, and quite frankly, I'm not looking too good at the moment either. It was a daunting thing to undertake, for sure. The first real emotional opportunity to focus on Blake was when I was in the emergency room, and one of my best friends that was supposed to be on the trip that couldn't make it came in, and he grabbed my hand, and all I said is, "I'm sorry we lost him." And I said he was a Charger. Don't risk more than is necessary to assure this is a repeatable function. And obviously we proved making some poor decisions, it's not a guarantee. You start with whoever doesn't feel comfortable, that's what we're going to decide. Here's the 3 things that we're going to do before we even consider skiing the slope, and follow through on those. I mean, almost like a checklist. I mean, at this point I've thought about just, you know, creating a laminated card that says, did you check these 8 things, and what was your follow through? And when it all adds up, after checking all 8 things, do you still feel comfortable skiing the slope? And if that's the case, then do it. But if there's anything on that card that makes you not feel comfortable, man, save it for another day, you know? Come back in the spring and ski the line when it's solid. Ski it 2 years from now when it's solid. Tour on, you know? Go find a low-angle slope that you can make turns with friends, or put in a jump on a low-angle slope and have a fun day hucking into powder, you know? I mean, there's just a multitude of things you can do and still have just as much enjoyment. But just set forth a pattern to succeed. Don't put yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you're flirting with the 50-50. If everything goes right, it's going to be great. If everything doesn't go quite right, it could be really bad.
Happy New Year's, Addie and Junior, and I'll see you in a bit.